Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to contribute to your work. I want to stress first that the legal issues are far less important than the public generally thinks. After 9/11, legal experts quickly concluded that we needed to strengthen the government's intelligence gathering authority, that we needed to shift the balance, as the saying goes, shift the balance between liberty and security. But legal rules are largely irrelevant at the stages where our intelligence problems have been the greatest, and that includes sharing information, as Larry Thompson just said, coordination, translation, analysis, and delivery. Even at the initial stage of gathering the intelligence, our capabilities are largely determined by agency culture, by technical and human resources. Again, all areas where our deficits have been enormous. So under these circumstances, a preoccupation with questions of legal authority can be misleading and dangerous. Obviously, the legal problems should be corrected. My point isn't to question their relevance, but we have to keep our priorities straight. The really grave weaknesses of our intelligence process can't be fixed by passing more laws. But if we focus so much on legal issues, as we have repeatedly since 9/11, we're inevitably going to be diverted from problems that matter much, much more. Now, looking specifically to the situation pre-9/11, the government's legal authority was strong. There were imperfections, but the record is clear that the legal imperfections were not to blame for the failure to prevent the attacks. We had severe human, budgetary, and organizational deficits that prevented our law enforcement and intelligence communities from using their legal powers effectively. The Moussaoui fiasco in August of '01 is a particularly clear example of that. And there's no reason to believe that additional legal authority would have been used to any greater advantage. For example, DOJ documents make clear that at least by April of 2000, department officials were aware of a pattern of FBI legal mistakes, and specifically FISA mistakes by the UBL unit. It's not clear what efforts were made to correct those deficiencies, either in the last half of 2000 or in the first half of 2001. But whatever the explanation, it's clear that by the summer of '01, we had many bright red warning lights flashing, clear at least in retrospect. And it's our deficiencies in organization, in resources, and in priorities that cost us whatever chances we might have had to abort the plot. Now, turning to the future, I've developed several ideas in my written testimony, but I'd like to focus quickly on 5 conclusions. First, overall, the government currently has sufficient legal tools, but it remains sorely lacking in the non-legal capabilities needed to deploy these tools effectively. Second, more than a dozen legal initiatives since 9/11 are demonstrably not justified as a response to September 11th. They impair privacy and they impair freedom, but they are completely irrelevant to fighting terrorism. Examples include parts of the new sneak and peek search powers and major parts of the new FISA powers, because these powers are available for use in investigations that are completely unrelated to terrorism. Now, thirdly, many of the new powers are relevant to fighting terrorism, but they are so overbroad that they actually undermine our security. Steps have been taken to restrict public information, to restrict access to the courts, and to reduce judicial oversight of searches and surveillance. The common thread that runs through these measures is the erosion and, in many instances, the complete obliteration of traditional checks and balances, reducing accountability to the courts, to the public, to the press, and even to Congress. Now, when I've just said that, that might sound a bit critical, so I want to be clear that this is simply a description, and I think an uncontroversial description of what has gone on. The Justice Department acknowledges this, and the Justice Department has publicly defended these steps as appropriate and necessary in our present circumstances. But the absence of effective systems of accountability is a recipe for wasted effort, misdirected resources, and bad mistakes. It does not help our security. Fourthly, our security depends on building confidence around the world that America exercises its power with restraint and with respect for the rule of law. But our present policies of secrecy and unchecked law enforcement power are fueling alienation and mistrust. So we're purchasing short-term gains, and usually slender gains at best. We're purchasing them at the price of fostering lasting animosity among the very people here and abroad whose help we need most if we are to break the cycle of terrorist violence. An example is the so-called enemy combatants power, and I gather that you have a section to focus on that, but this is particularly central to the idea of accountability. The administration's claim of power to seize a U.S. citizen here in the United States and hold the person indefinitely with no access to the courts or even to his own family. No other democratic country, including Israel, who has at least as serious problems as our own, no other country would detain an alleged enemy combatant for as long as 18 days, much less for the 18 months that Jose Padilla has been held incommunicado. Finally, to maximize our security and to preserve fundamental freedoms, we have to act quickly in two areas that I would urge you to focus on. First, we must restore effective checks and balances. Secondly, we have to make the commitment to provide a substantial infusion of resources. We need resources to support the intelligence process, we need resources to facilitate accountability, and we need resources to protect soft targets on the ground. Without protective measures, too many of our high-priority targets will be vulnerable no matter how good our intelligence may be. One lesson of the two most recent attacks in Saudi Arabia is that even with unlimited government powers of surveillance and interrogation, those powers aren't much help if important targets are not well protected. On both of those occasions, intelligence officials warned that an attack was imminent, but without adequate defense on the ground, the plot succeeded anyway. So here at home, we are nowhere near what's needed to protect key targets like ports, chemical plants, and our major weapons facilities. Now, doing what's needed in those areas will be expensive, but if we're willing to pay that price, we can be reasonably safe and reasonably free. If we're not willing to pay that price, we cannot be safe no matter how much of our liberty we're willing to surrender. Thank you.